Welcome to Brew Cheese, where we brew up the finest of cheese. I'm Travis, and thanks for tuning in. If you're new to our channel, we brew up commander decks on a budget, often with an unexpected twist. This series uses a $100 budget and does not include the cost of the commander. Today, we take a look at a new commander from Ikoria, Kogla, the Titan 8. I see him as an obvious call-out to the Empire State Building's arch-nemesis, Kong. King Kong, if you prefer. He is a 3 green 7/6/8 that has several abilities. When he enters the battlefield, he fights a creature you don't control. When he attacks, you destroy target artifact or enchantment controlled by the defending player. And, for 1 and a green, you can bounce a human you control to your hand and make him indestructible. So what do we do with this titan of gorilla kind? Our strategy is to ramp, with humans, abuse enter the battlefield effects, with humans, control the board state, sort of with humans, and draw cards until we find a win condition, that also uses humans. However, this is not a traditional human tribal deck. So let's dive right in with how we ramp, mostly with humans. We start with Harvester Druid, a human who taps for a mana that matches a land we control. Similar to that is Whisperer of the Wilds, a shaman who taps for 1 green. However, if we control a powerful creature, she taps for 2 green. Juniper Order Druid costs 2 and a green and taps to untap a land. Croson Restore is an almost identical copy. However, you get an additional toughness and the ability to untap 3 lands if you have 7 or more cards in your graveyard. Stonecedar Hierophant also taps to untap a land. However, when you play a land, she untaps. It is important to note that each of these creatures is a human as their main creature type. Nyx Lotus is an artifact costing 4 that enters tapped. Then it taps for any 1 color equal to your devotion to that color. This is a budget form of Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, which we are not running. Oh, sorry, spoiler alert. Similar to the Lotus, Karametra's Acolyte also taps for mana equal to your devotion to that color. She also costs 4 and is a 1/4 human. Sakura Tribe Elder is the only non-human in our ramp package. It costs 2 and sacrifices to search for a basic land onto the field tapped. Harrow is an instant that costs 3 and sacrificing a land to search up 2 basics onto the field, untapped. One final piece of human ramp is Drum Hunter. He costs 4 and taps for 1 colorless. I know, right? Powerful. Oh, I forgot to mention. You also draw a card at the beginning of your end step if you control a creature with power 5 or greater. I fully realize that green as a color has much more powerful forms of ramp. However, by using humans as our mana dorks, we can bounce them to protect our commander, and themselves actually. Moving on, we will be running nearly every green human that has a decent enter the battlefield trigger. Plan to cast these creatures often and multiple times each. Borderland Ranger costs 3 and fetches a land to our hand when he enters the battlefield. Hidden Herbalists costs 2 and generates 2 green mana upon entering as long as the permanent we controlled left the field this turn. We'll talk more about them in a little bit. Hyrax Tower Scout untaps a creature upon entering. Another one we'll talk about in a bit. Eternal Witness is a popular green human who returns a card to our hand from the graveyard. Setessan Petitioner costs 3 and gains us life equal to our devotion upon entering. 1 cast might only get 5 or 6 life, but 5 mana to bounce her and recast over and over piles up the life gain pretty quickly. Maul Splicer and Vital Splicer are similar in that they each create 3/3 Golem artifact tokens upon entering. The Maul costs 7 and makes 2 tokens, plus gives your golems trample. Vital only costs 4, makes 1 token, and lets you pay 1 to regenerate any golem. Obsessive Skinner costs 2 and puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Then, at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if you have 4 or more card types in their graveyard, you put another +1/+1 counter on a creature. Hornbash Mentor costs 3, puts a trample counter on a non-human and can be tapped along with 2 and a green to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with trample. Given that our commander does not have trample naturally, this is one method of getting it on him. Atzocan Archer has reach and fights another creature when it enters. This is useful for clearing opposing mana dorks or small creatures that are becoming bothersome. Given Green's general lack of board wipes, we have to find a more creative way to control our opposing boards. We will take a page out of our commander's abilities and use fight mechanics to the fullest we can. A fight is 2 target creatures dealing damage to each other equal to their power. Since we can bounce a human to our hand to make Kong indestructible, it just doesn't really seem fair, does it? Ancient Animus is an instant for 2 that puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature if it's legendary. Then, that creature fights a creature you don't control. Foe-Razor Regent is one of our highest CMC cards at 7. However, it brings some excellent abilities. It has flying, in green, I know. It fights upon entering. Then, whenever a creature we control fights and survives, it gets 2 +1/+1 counters at the beginning of the next end step. Thorn Mammoth is our tag team partner for fights. It also costs 7, has trample, and fights a creature whenever itself or another creature enters the battlefield under our control. Since we can bounce our cheap humans and recast them multiple times, this can wipe out a lot of creatures. Ulvenwald Tracker is one of our cheapest creatures that's also a human. However, we don't want to bounce it unless absolutely necessary because we can pay 2 and tap it to create a fight. Aggressive Instinct and Rabid Bite are duplicates of each other. Each is a sorcery costing 2 and having a creature we control deal damage to another creature. This is not a fight as only our creature deals damage. Similarly, Ram Through has an identical effect for the same price. However, it is an instant and lets our creature's damage trample through if our creature has trample. We do have one Planeswalker helping us out. Vivian of the Arcbow costs 6 and enters with 5 loyalty counters. Her +2 puts 2 +1/+1 counters on up to 1 target creature. -3 is a Rabid Bite effect. -9 gives all of our creatures +4/+4 and trample until end of turn. All of these effects are beneficial to this deck. Let's kick off our draw with Zendikar Resurgent. Yes, it costs 7, but it doubles our mana production from lands, and it draws us a card whenever we cast a creature spell. Beast Whisperer also draws us a card when we cast a creature. Lifecrafter's Bestiary lets us pay a green to draw a card whenever we cast a creature. It also lets us scry 1 at the beginning of our upkeep. Speaking of our upkeep, if we control a creature with power 4 or greater, Colossal Majesty will draw us a card. Elemental Bond draws a card when a creature with power 3 or greater enters our field. Guardian Project and Soul of the Harvest function basically identically. Whenever a non-token creature enters our field, we draw a card. The Project is an enchantment for 4, and the Soul is a 6/6 trampler for 6. Endless Atlas is a 2-cost artifact that lets us pay 2 and tap it to draw a card. We merely have to have 3 forests out to do this. Viridian Revel is an enchantment that draws us a card whenever an artifact is put into an opposing graveyard from the field. Given our commander's attack trigger, this can net us an additional card whenever we attack. While Kong will be our primary form of artifact and enchantment control, he can't do it alone. Fortunately, green as a color is primed to help. Broken Bond is a 2-cost sorcery that also lets us put a land from our hand onto the battlefield. Naturalize and Wilt are 2-cost instants that destroy target artifact or enchantment. Wilt can also be cycled away for 2. Nature's Claim is a single green instant that gives the controller of the destroyed artifact or enchantment 4 life. A fair trade more often than not. Croson Grip is, in my opinion, one of the best artifact enchantment removal pieces in the game. It costs 3 and has split second, effectively making it uncounterable. It also prevents any more spells or abilities from being added to the stack until it resolves. Caller of the Hunt costs 3 for a human lord. This is not a legendary creature, by the way. When it enters the field, you choose a creature type, then Caller of the Hunt's power and toughness are equal to the number of those types of creatures in play. This counts all creatures of the chosen type, not just yours. Chameleon Colossus is a 4/4 changeling, meaning it counts as a human, with protection from black. It can also double its power for each 2 green you pay at instant speed. Champion of Lambholt is one of our sneaky humans. Whenever another creature enters our battlefield, it gets a +1/+1 counter. Also, creatures with power less than the champions cannot block any of our creatures. Paragon of Eternal Wilds gives our green creatures an anthem effect and can be tapped along with a green to give target green creature we control trample until end of turn. Fully Grown is a giant growth that puts a trample counter on the creature targeted. Aid from the Cowl has us reveal the top card of our library at the beginning of our end step if a permanent we controlled left the field during our turn. If the revealed card is a permanent, we may put it onto the field. If we choose not to put it in play, or if it isn't a permanent, we can instead put it on the bottom of our deck. Given our commander's ability to bounce a human at any time, we can use this quite frequently. Ronus's Monument is a 3-cost artifact that reduces the cost of our green creature spells by 1. Additionally, when we cast a creature spell, we give one of our creatures +2/+2 and trample until end of turn. Emerald Medallion simply reduces the cost of all of our green spells by 1. Nylea Keen-Eyed is a 4-cost god. She's indestructible, is a 5/6, requires devotion of 5 to be a creature, reduces creature spell costs by 1, and lets us pay 3 to reveal the top card of our deck. If it's a creature, it goes in our hand, or we can choose to discard it. Heartstone reduces the cost of creature abilities by 1, so Kong's human bounce only costs 1 green. Altar of the Brood is a personal favorite. It costs 1 and makes each opponent put the top card of their library into their graveyard whenever we have a permanent enter the field. This includes lands and tokens. While this does help feed delve strategies, there are enough strategies that don't like graveyard recursion to make this a fun card. Archetype of Endurance is our highest CMC spell. It's a 6/5 boar that gives all of our creatures hexproof while removing and preventing our opponent's creatures from having it. Bonds of Mortality is a 2-cost enchantment that lets us pay 1 green to remove hexproof and indestructible from our opponent's creatures until end of turn. It also draws us a card when it enters. Overwhelming Stampede gives all of our creatures +X/+X and trample until end of turn, X equaling the highest power among creatures we control. Casting this after a few creature spells with Ronus's Monument out can close the game quickly. Destiny Spinner is a 2-cost 2/3 that prevents our creatures and enchantments from being countered. It can also turn a land into a creature with power toughness equal to the number of our enchantments. Given that we only have 11 enchantments in the whole deck, this probably won't be used often. Everyone knows that while it may have been Beauty that killed the beast, the airplanes flying around his head didn't help. How do we guard against the flyers destined to knock us off of our building? We start with Sandworm Convergence. It costs 8, but flat out keeps flying creatures from attacking us. It also generates a 5/5 green worm at the end of each of our turns. Hurricane costs X and a green and is a sorcery. It deals damage to all players and creatures with flying equal to the amount of mana we pay into X. Corrosive Gale and Windstorm are functional duplicates. Each is an instant that deals X damage to each creature with flying. The Gale costs 1 Phyrexian green and X, while Windstorm is simply 1 green and X. Nylea's Intervention is X green for a sorcery. We then pick one effect. Either we search our library for X land cards and put them into our hand, or deal 2 times X damage to each creature with flying. Silklash Spider is a 2/7 spider with reach for 5. It also has a repeatable instant speed Windstorm effect for X green. We do have one true board wipe. Nevdisk is a 4-cost artifact that enters tapped. Then you pay 1, tap it, and destroy all artifacts, creatures, and enchantments. Terrain Generator taps for 1 colorless or can be tapped along with 2 to put a basic land onto the field tapped. This is useful for when we draw lands after we've played our 1 per turn. Bonder's Enclave also taps for 1 colorless, but lets us draw a card if we control a creature with power 4 or greater. Blighted Woodland can be tapped, sacked, and 4 mana paid to search for 2 basics onto the field tapped. Myriad Landscape is similar, but it enters tapped and only costs 2 to search for the 2 basics onto the field tapped. Castle Garenbrig enters tapped unless we control a forest, and we know how hard that's going to be, right? It taps for 1 green, or we can pay 2 green and tap it to generate 6 green mana usable only for creature spells or creature ability activations. Arcane Lighthouse taps for 1 colorless, or we can pay 1 and tap it to remove Hexproof and Shroud from our opponent's creatures until end of turn. We finish out with 29 basic forests. Before we end, I would like to explain a couple of the combos and tricks in this deck. Hidden Herbalists, Ronus's Monument, and Heartstone with Kong on the field lets us bounce and cast Hidden Herbalists an infinite amount of times, pumping 1 creature by 2 each time and giving it trample. The Monument reduces the Herbalist cost to a single green mana. The Heartstone reduces the cost of Kong's ability to bounce to a single green mana. When Herbalist enters the battlefield, it generates green, which is exactly the cost to bounce it and recast it. If you have a different cost reducer than Ronus's Monument, say Emerald Medallion, just add Altar of the Brood. This will let you deck your opponents. Each time the Herbalist enters the field, each opponent mills 1. Hyrax Tower Scout and Karamitra's Acolyte with Kong out generate infinite mana as long as your devotion is at least 6. This means you only need 1 additional green mana symbol to make this work. Here's how. You tap Karamitra's Acolyte for 6 green mana. Use 2 of it to bounce the Scout to your hand, leaving 4 mana. Use 3 mana to cast the Scout, untapping the Acolyte when it enters, and leaving you 1 mana in your mana pool. Heartstone reduces the devotion requirement for this combo by 1. Each cost reducer also reduces the devotion requirement by 1 up to 2. If you luck out and get Heartstone, Emerald Medallion, and Ronus's Monument, you will tap for 5, which is the devotion for each of the creatures you control, and only use 2 of that mana to bounce and recast the Scout. Be careful with these combos. If you have any of the permanents that make you draw a card when you cast a creature, you can easily deck yourself. Also, these combos are fairly easily broken. Destiny Spinner can keep your creatures from being countered, but these combos are not done at instant speed. I mentioned earlier that we can bounce our mana dorks to protect Kong. I should also point out that this also protects our dorks from board wipes. If someone casts any wrath effect, or if we are about to trigger our Nev disc, we can bounce as many of our mana dorks as we have mana for, giving Kong indestructible, and replay them again. It'll slow us down a little, but not as much as others relying on mana dorks. As an interesting tidbit, our average converted mana cost for this deck is 3.35. The vast majority of spells we play cost either 2 or 3. The total cost for this deck came up to $77.48. These prices are powered by TCG Player, not a sponsor, using optimized pricing and allowing for cards of any condition. This price does not include the cost of the commander or shipping. Thank you for watching, and if you like what we're doing here, subscribe or share this video with a friend, or leave a comment telling us what we missed or what you'd like to see in the future. See you again next video.